Okay, so welcome to this free webinar on action groups, learning from your experiences. And not all of you, some of you I have known for years and years, but not all of you. So I'm Melanie Green, I'm an occupational psychologist, and I have been running my own business now for 30 years. I work as a coach, trainer, workplace mediator. I work in all different types of organisations, from the public sector, with social workers in schools, with the teaching staff, to the private sector, engineering, manufacturing, opera companies, scientific research companies, you name it, because it's about helping people, and it's about what happens when people kind of go wrong at work, and that's what I kind of specialize in. One is around resilience in the workplace and how people cope with the pressures of life in order to really thrive, not just survive. And I think too many people are just in survival mode. And the other area is how people communicate and work with each other, and what happens when that sort of thing starts to go wrong. And I really feel passionately about practicing what I preach. And I always joke that I was known as moody, miserable Melanie when I was growing up. And that was no joke, really. That's what I was like. I wasn't a happy bunny. And right through to really my 30s. And when I set up my business, I was then in charge of my own development. And everything I learned, I just applied to myself. And so I'm living proof that you can kind of change from that inside out, and quite radically. So let's talk about this session. What we're going to cover is, first of all, we're going to look at the challenges that you have and what stops you from learning and changing and kind of growing as a human being. I'm going to talk through the action group process that I've created and that you're going to go through today. Then explore very briefly about the being and doing process. And then you're going to go into pairs, and you'll look at your successes, challenges, lessons learned, etc. And then I'm going to introduce two models. One is about where to start to change and why sometimes change is difficult, and look at the circle of influence, and then action planning. And it mirrors some of the action group process. I was going to say this up front in case some people need to leave early. You might need to rush off to 1 o'clock meetings or something. If you're not already registered with my website, which is inspiredtransformation.co.uk, I would sign up for there, because there you've got Melanie's Monday motivational messages, and probably if it's not next week, it'll be the week after I will send a recording, is that you'll get my Inspire monthly coaching newsletter, which goes into more depth in topics, and also knowledge of other free webinars that come up. So I also wanted to say, starting in January, I've got two being and doing processes. One is an 8-week online course, video-based course, that you work through in your own time, and you get videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And you get emails every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. The Monday one has videos and a workbook, and there's a different theme in each of the 8 weeks. And then I also got my new 3-month being and doing action group transformation process, and that starts on the 18th of January. And on bookings before the 17th of December, you get really good discounts. So again, go to my website, and I'll send you an email with the PowerPoints after this, and anything else that's kind of come up, and some more information about those courses. So that was just in case you need to leave. So let's do a poll, and to look at what stops you from learning and developing. So hopefully you can all see them on the screen. So the 71% was, I find that my thoughts and my mood undermine my confidence. Very, very common. I've written a book about mastering your inner critic, releasing your inner wisdom. Is that, we keep on beating ourselves up often when we most need to support ourselves. Also, 71% is that when the going gets tough, I tend to lack energy to keep going. And I think it's so important. That's where the being and doing comes in, that you look after yourself in order to be able to keep on doing the things that you want to do. Also, people talking about constantly firefighting and getting distracted by life events, is that I've got a number of coaching clients at the moment who are of the age like I am, who've got aging parents, and all the life events around or dealing with those, and how that can knock you off the rails in terms of the plans that you've got. So I'll stop sharing those for the time being. And let's go on to looking at the action group process. Is that there are, over the years, looking at people changing and running courses in all different types of organizations, we would start to run more ongoing programs, but somehow it often lacked the intensity. There was too much time. And so the action group process is that every 2 weeks, roughly, is that you have a session like this. It's an 1.5-hour session, so it's slightly longer. So you're encouraged to take action between the sessions. Another bit of feedback that came through from the pilot in the summer, someone said that what is really great is that you are kind of kept on your toes. Is that if there's a month in between sessions, you can kind of get so stuck in, you forget what your actions are. So you take your actions, it might be very small steps, it might be about daily habits and creating new habits, very much about changing from the inside out, often mastering what's going on up here in your head. Then we come together and you do paired work in terms of reviewing, and we're going to go through that process. So looking at your successes that you have, large and small, challenges, so being really honest and open about that, and then your lessons learned as well. And then I provide input, as I am today, but with this, the actual courses, is that you get a chance to ask questions between the sessions as well as during the sessions, and I can tailor the input to the group that I've got. And so you learn some more, then you set new action plans, and then you go off and you take those actions, and we keep on going around. And the pilot actually was it was two months, whereas it's going to be a 3 months program in reality. And people made huge shifts in terms of their lives. And I'll send you some links to some of the testimonials as well. Before we do it, I wanted to just talk about the being and doing. So all my program online courses are being and doing in one way or the other. So you can apply it to whatever you're doing in your life. Is that what I've realized over the years, both for myself and my clients, is that if we don't work on the being and we just focus on what we're doing, that's where we get unstuck. Because the being is our thoughts, our beliefs. So it might be beliefs about ourselves or beliefs about the situation we're in. That affects how we feel and our mood, then our resilience, our energy levels, motivation, etc., and our satisfaction in life as well. And that then impacts on our ability to do, our behavior, communication, the habits we have, and ultimately our performance if you're thinking about a work context. So bear that in mind when you're reflecting on your successes and challenges, because there might be quite a lot of successes in terms of the being. So, one of my successes is we've had an incredibly difficult, like many people, a difficult pandemic and difficult 18 months. But my mum went into kind of full-blown dementia, having been completely independent before the first lockdown. And so, actually a lot of mine is how I've managed myself, how I've managed my interactions with her and my brother, and how we've worked together. And so it might be things like that. But my resilience is that actually I'm really proud about how resilient I have been. So think about that. So I'm going to put you in a moment into pairs, is that what I want to do is to just say about the boundaries is you'll have equal time slots. You're going to have 5 minutes each, and I'll send a message halfway through, is that please respect people's confidentiality. They may share things in the pairs, but they don't want them shared during the main group. Also, please don't talk about people outside of this. I see that 2 people do know each other. Is you can talk about me as much as you want outside of this webinar. Is that also just listen. Don't feel you've got to fix anything. You're not there to solve the problem. You can empathize, obviously, if you ask questions if it's going to help them, but not just if you're being nosy, sort of thing. And maybe be like, there's an American coach called Michael Neal who I've followed for many years and go on his programs, and he talks about being a rock with ears, is just listening and enable that person to have that space to think. And so is what you're going to be doing is sharing in your 5 minutes successes, large and small. So you might choose a few kind of key things. Think about the being as well as the doing, is your challenges that you faced, then your lessons learned. And I often find that this is often quite kind of profound when I'm running ongoing programs, is what people are learning about themselves or others, and also about life in general. And so any kind of questions you've got about the process. Sally, do you want to ask that question again?
I just wanted to ask whether there is an age at which we are less likely to embrace any kind of change. We just cling to what we know because that's safer or because that's the habits we've got into. We think of young people as being very willing to embrace change, but is there an age at which that desire for change stops?
Well, I would say that it's because there was all that kind of old fallacy that, when you're older, you get stuck in your ways, and people kind of saying, well, the what's the expression? The leopard can't change their spots and all of that sort of thing. But actually, it's much more about our personality and our upbringing as to whether we're open to change at any age. Is that so? I come across people who are quite young, but who are very fearful of change. And there are, plenty of examples, I think, particularly nowadays, where people at, 80 are, starting new careers or taking up marathon running or doing, completely different things. So it's much more about mindset than it is about age. And certainly what neuroscientists are finding out about the brain is that we have got this neuroplasticity, is that if we consistently do things, we can develop new skills and new habits, etc. Obviously, taking out things like dementia or anything like that. So hopefully that answers your question. Well, that's my viewpoint on the question. Has anybody else got any questions? Okay, let's move on then. What I wanted to do is a part of the being and doing and the action group process is that you take action, you then review, and then you have some input that is related to your needs. And this is one of the models that I'd share with most clients at some point, is that it's from Robert Dilts, who is an NLP master practitioner. He's a very famous NLP, it's neuro-linguistic programming, if you've not come across it before. And he's somebody who I really rate. I've done quite a bit of training with him. He's one of those NLP trainers who, when you meet him face to face, he's just as genuine as he is on the stage. So a lot of them kind of wear a mask, and he's really genuine person. And he created this model of change. And why a lot of people find it difficult to change their behaviors and change their habits or develop new habits is explained by this model. So I'm going to talk through it, and you might want to kind of think about how does it relate to what you're trying to change now or what you might want to do next year. And feel free to ask any questions in the chat box. So the first thing is the level of environment. And I would say, like, if you want to have a potentially difficult conversation with somebody, then choosing when and where is actually going to be very important. Is that but with other things is I sometimes get clients who come to me and they're very stressed and they say, Melanie, you should see my desk. If only I could clear up my desk, then things would be better. I wouldn't be so stressed. And I kind of say, well, actually, your messy desk is probably a symptom rather than a cause of your stress levels. The stress levels are going to be at a higher level. So when we come to the level of behavior, once you've reached a certain age, it's often we know how to behave, but something is stopping us behaving in certain ways in certain situations. So if you take something like assertiveness, so for example, when I was growing up, my father was a consultant to the hotel and restaurant industry. And so the one place I had learnt to be assertive was in restaurants. If things were not right, and we're going back to, back into the 70s and 80s, there was a lot not right in restaurants in those days in the UK, and certainly the restaurants we were going into. And I was very polite, but I knew how to do it. I couldn't be assertive in any other aspect of my life. I was I was terrified of conflict. So I knew the behaviors, but something else was stopping me. And in this model is that the level of competence is how you represent things up here. So the messages you have and the pictures you have. So if you take something like assertiveness, if you think that, well, if I want a more balanced life, I'm going to need to say no to more people and more requests. If I say no, then if I have a picture of people exploding at me or being unhappy, which are then they're driven by the level of beliefs. So beliefs are beliefs about other people. Other people will be upset with me, they'll be angry, or about the situation they're in. Identity of beliefs about yourself. So you might believe you're not an assertive person. You might believe that you're always I'm just a chaotic person, or something like that. And while you believe that, it's very hard to behave differently, because that affects the thoughts and the pictures you have in your head that then affect how you feel and then how you behave. And then at the top of this model is the level of spiritual purpose. And so, one is it might be your sense of purpose. And for me, I have a really strong sense of purpose. So even in the tough times, I've been running my business for 30 years. And I've gone through many recessions those years. And when work is really quiet, I love my work, but when work's really quiet and I need to keep on marketing and doing things, it's hanging on to my why, as Simon Sinek would talk about it, my sense of purpose that helps me to then carry on with the behaviours that might feel hard otherwise. I was running a program for a large police force, and I had quite a senior manager, and I was sharing this model, and he went, he said, when I joined the police force, I had a strong sense of purpose. I wanted to serve the public. And he said, I've completely lost that in the bureaucracy now and in the paperwork, and I need to reconnect with my sense of purpose and get that spark back to my work. Or it might be in terms of your spirits. So it's whatever lifts your spirits is that and keeps you going. So one of the things that I've been doing for the last year is I walk every day. And since April, I walk in early morning. Following Michael Mosley's Do One Thing, and this was to do with sleep, it has a profound impact on your sleep if you go for an early morning walk within 2 hours of waking. Really has had a positive impact. But the other positive thing is being out in nature. I'm very lucky, 5 minutes away from a canal and then fields, and just seeing nature, and the change of the scenery, of seasons and the sky, it lifts my spirit. So whatever going on in my life or how I'm feeling physically, I come back ready for my day work or the weekend in good spirits, whatever the weather, quite frankly. So this model is incredibly useful. And what I will do is I'll send you a handout that then takes you through a kind of process of thinking about how you can apply this and how you can change at the different levels. So anybody got any questions about this and about how you might apply it, please feel free to type again. So Candice, do you want to just unmute yourself and ask the question?
Thank you, Melanie. I'm not entirely sure how to use this model or how to understand it. So do we pick anywhere on the chart and choose that place to change, or is it about picking the one that relates more to your identity? I'm not really sure.
So what you do is that, and the handout will help you because it's also got a little worksheet. So it's kind of saying, what is it you want to do or achieve? So you might be kind of saying, actually, I want a more balanced life, and but what's stopping me from achieving that is actually I'm worried about saying no to people. Is that because people often think a balanced life is about getting a better time management process. Frequently it's not. Frequently you've got an unbalanced life because you're saying yes to too much. Is that you're taking on too much. So if it's something like that, it's then thinking about, well, where is the block? So if you're worried about, it's a belief about, so it's at the level of belief that actually somebody is going to be upset with me. And then it's about challenging and saying, so what might be a more empowering belief that is going to help me to say no and therefore lead to a more balanced life? And it's thinking about what would be a more empowering belief to have and a more empowering thought process. And there are different kind of exercises in my book and other things around creating better beliefs and more empowering beliefs. I think if you're feeling really ground down, I mean, we've had such a difficult 18 months. And, you may have had, different, if you're working, it might be that suddenly you're working from home, is that maybe work has got incredibly busy. Maybe you were furloughed and then you're back to work, or like me, you might have loads of things going on outside of work. Is that you may be very low in your spirit. So I would say work at that level, because when you feel better, some people are kind of saying about that energy when you get knocked back is how keeping the energy and the motivation is really difficult. And I would say tapping into your sense of purpose and doing things that lift your spirits. And it might be singing in a choir. It might be, I love painting. And one of the things also that's got me through the pandemic is painting and listening to Radio 4 plays on their app. Is that, there are different sort of things that might help you. It will be different for different individuals. So has that helped to answer your question? Or is there more to it?
I believe so. My follow-up question or thought is that what happens if you think there are multiple places that need to change? So for example, for me, I think that my spirit/purpose are interlinked with my beliefs and hence affects my behavior. So then I guess, is it starting at the root level?
Go to the top, because when the top is, it changes, then everything else is impacted. But we don't have time here, but to kind of explore in a bit more kind of depth is about what those kind of beliefs might be. So it may be that you have a strong sense of purpose, but you're aware that there's a limiting belief that's stopping you from achieving them. I don't know, does that sound achieving that purpose? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, that does make sense, yeah.
Okay, so always kind of go for the top one. And it's interesting, people often kind of think that time comes up with so much when people are trying to make changes, and they often think, well, it's a level of environment, I just have to somehow create more time. Well, we have a certain amount of time. It will be around your beliefs around time and around either how you manage it, how you ask other people. I was just coaching a client this morning, and she's lives alone and got a lot going on outside of work as well. And I was saying that actually getting better at asking for support. So she had a bad reaction from her booster and was laid low for about 3 days. And she said, it made me realize that, I'm alone. And if, what if I got COVID, or what if, and I said, but you've got loads of friends who would be more than happy, like you would, go and help them and support them. They would be happy to do that. But there's something around her beliefs, around either herself as an independent person or about other people. Oh, I don't want to bother them. Oh, they'll think, they'll think I'm needy, or whatever else it might be, that then stops us from asking for that support. So any other questions from anybody else about this? As I say, I will send you a handout, but either just unmute yourself or type in the chat box. Okay, so what I'd like to do is move on to, now this is from Stephen Covey's book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I know it's been around for decades, but there's some really good things in there. And this model comes from there. And I am frequently sharing this with people because we often get stuck in our circle of concern. And so let me talk it through, because some of you might not have come across it before. So you actually, it'd be useful in the chat box if you just say whether you have seen this before or not. But the circle of concern are things that concern us and impact on us, but that we have no control over. A global pandemic. I think we can do about that, other than what the actions we can take in our circle of influence. If you work in an organization, there might be restructures that happen, new policies and procedures impact on you, but you have no influence over it. It might be that your manager, who you really like, is suddenly moving, and your new manager isn't somebody who you don't gel with. And so when we end up focusing completely on our circle of concern, depending on what the issue is, we either get very anxious or stressed about it. We might get very frustrated. We might get angry about it. Is that we're not in a good place, and it's like banging your head against a brick wall. Whereas when we focus on our circle of influence, is that starts with our thoughts and our beliefs, that then it affects our mood and our emotions and our behavior and actions and how we communicate. And when we focus on our circle of influence, is that we feel empowered, we feel motivated, we've got energy, we're in flow, and it's a great place to be. And we can expand our circle of influence a bit. Obviously not, we're not going to be masters and mistresses of the universe, but we can expand our circle of influence a bit. But what we do is we feel so much better. And so the whole time with my clients is, let's come back to the circle of influence, because there will be all of these things going on. And so it's occasionally I have to remind myself, if I get overwhelmed. I remember it was after the 2008 financial crash, and quite a few months after that, I remember I was in Henley-on-Thames, which, if people don't live nearby, it's in the south of Oxfordshire. I was visiting for the day, and it's a wealthy area. And I started counting the number of shops that were closed and getting more and more depressed about the recession. And then I thought, what are you doing? You're here for a day out. Stop doing that. It's that you're just making yourself miserable because you're focusing on your circle of concern, which of course the recession was having an impact, had a huge impact on my business. There was one year where 5 projects got cancelled. That had a huge impact on my business. But actually doing that was not going to help me to actually focus on how do I survive, thrive, and grow my business. So, any questions about this before we move on? So, any questions? Anyone want to just unmute themselves And what I'd like you to say is, what's in your circle? So maybe in the chat box, what's in your circle of concern at the moment? And what's in your circle of influence? And like, for example, my mum has dementia. Sadly, nothing I can do about it. It's getting worse very rapidly. But focusing on my circle of influence helps me to support her in the right way, is to work with my brother to support her. So you can apply this to anything, both in or outside of work. So, okay, people being quite private at the moment in terms of not sharing anything. So, yes, social injustice, poverty, yes. And I have to say is that when I was young, I was very immersed in my circle concerned. I was incredibly depressed about what was going on in the world. That, you know, and at the time also in the 80s, those of you old enough to remember, is that there was a chance of kind of nuclear annihilation. And that was on my mind, as well as seeing kind of all the famines going on in the world and the wars. And I just got really dragged down by it. And what I find now is that by focusing on my circle of influence, yes, I am concerned about those things, but then I take action. Is that, you know, maybe, you know, is that I, you know, one of the things I've done voluntary work for many decades in schools. And so, you know, it might be that you either work locally or you start to work on a kind of more kind of global, either voluntary or in your work. Is that, or maybe it's just being able to talk to people and help educate people, but it's focusing on that circle of influence. Is that, you know, and help people to open their eyes about some of those things that others are concerned about. So Claire saying, we're talking about those world events and the misinformation, and then coming into your circle of influence about your work, your family, home, choir, your beliefs. Also, some of those things, family, is we don't always have control over everything. Is again recognizing what we do have control of. And that's where we will get the energy. That's where we get the real traction in order to help us to change and to grow as an individual. And to, you know, and part of that, you know, our purpose and spirit, if you feel a lot of people talking about, you know, those global issues that, you know, the injustice, poverty, it will give you the energy to be able to deal with those. Somebody else has said about concerns, struggles of the people I love. And that is so hard. And I really kind of, you know, feel for you, as I've, you know, certainly have, you know, been there in the past and in there again, but in a totally different way. But, you know, the best way of being to support others is to look after ourselves. And it was one of the things I had a period of 6 years where both my parents were very seriously ill in very different ways. My mum had severe kind of psychiatric problems. And what I learned was I had to keep on giving to myself in order to give to them. And it became a new belief that I had, that I recognized that how important that was to do. It also meant I was in the best possible place to be able to know how to have conversations with them and how to support them when they're struggling. That's a whole nother webinar, I feel, coming on. But it is, and I think we can have the belief that, but it's selfish to do things for myself when either my family is suffering or there's so much, you know, suffering in the world. But actually, they don't want us to be miserable. You know, they'd be going out in a moment. You've got X, Y, and Z in your life. You have food in the, you know, fridge. You've got a house. You know, actually to enjoy that while, if you care, taking action for others. So, any other kind of questions or comments that you want to make? So I would go and look at this and really keep on kind of going back to this model. Whenever you feel swamped by things or disillusioned, come back to this model, because it might well be that there's something that is going on that you're focusing on your circle of concern rather than your circle of influence. So what I'd like you to do is think about, so this is mirroring the action group process, is what are the actions you're going to take, maybe in the next 24 hours or the next week? And I always ask people 3 things, although you might not have actions in each of these. What are you going to keep doing that's working for you? So thinking about in terms of supporting yourself, in terms of, developing and changing, etc. What are you going to keep doing? What do you need to develop further? So is it your ability to be patient? Is it your assertiveness? Is it your ability to find balance in your life? Whatever it is, it your ability to focus on the circle of influence? And then what do you need to let go of that is causing you to struggle and and maybe draining your energy? So is that the other day I had one of those eureka moments. I was actually doing my morning Pilates at home. I was lying on my front, and a lot going on with my mum, and she's going to be moving into a care home shortly. And I had been really overwhelmed that weekend, and I was doing my Pilates, and I just suddenly went, just let go. And at that moment, I just let go of all the kind of like, somehow I can control of this, and just come into that circle of influence and come into my centered self, and just trust that in the moment by moment by moment, I will know what to do. I don't have to figure it all out here. I don't know whether that makes sense to you. So it might be letting go. So I'm going to shut up for a few moments. And what I'd like you to do is to, in the action groups, we either, because we have more time, we go back into pairs and people share, or people share, we go around. We haven't got time to do that. But please do in the chat box, share some of your actions. And I'm going to be quiet for a few minutes and allow you to do that. So we got keep doing things that ground me, yoga, reading, speaking to grandparents, getting to know God. Then somebody else saying start doing daily walking, stop social media or reduce it, continue CBT practitioner training course, sounds good. And somebody else saying develop further, consistency and following through on my word and my decisions, and letting go of indecision and disregard for my own decisions. Interesting. So somebody else is saying, I'm going to find, to develop further organization, find systems that work for me. And yeah, there are so many systems out there. I would go for the simplest as possible. Is that there are often quite kind of complex things that seem to be more work than they save you time doing. So, okay, feel free to share some more. So just a reminder again of the courses that I've got coming up, the Being and Doing 8-week course, the 3 months action process, and the free coaching audits as well. And a few of you I think have come through Eventbrite. If you're not registered with my website, inspiretransformation.co.uk, please do. Feel free to register, and then you'll get my Melanie's Monday motivational messages, etc. So somebody says, I really like the personal development suggestions about beliefs and behaviors. Great, that's good. Somebody else, keep doing nourishing daily and weekly things. Let go of trying to exactly duplicate a pre-lockdown life. Yes, yeah. My life is very, very different. I have ongoing health issues, and so I'm not getting back to normal, but I do things like my daily walks and my painting, working from home. It's great. I barely get in my car nowadays. It's wonderful. I'm not driving all over the place, much kinder for the environment. And so sometimes it's embracing the differences in that pre-lockdown life. So thank you so much for coming along. If you have any questions, we've got a few minutes left, but I do like to finish on time. So, and I will email you the slides in a couple of days once the video is edited, and I'll email you the handout on the logical levels of change and some other information that you might find useful. So I'm going to Candace, do you want to ask your question? You've raised your hand.
I do, thank you. And I saw Sheila also was about to, so sorry, Sheila. Do you have any advice for somebody who, for me, I feel as though my brain is always going through processes of figuring out what's wrong and then trying to find solutions, so much so that there's never time to even remember and action the solutions that I came up with. So do you have any advice for, I guess simplifying that process and just focusing on one thing? How do you pick just one thing when there's millions?
Well, I think it is about quietening down your mind. It's because at the moment it sounds like there's 101 things. So I think it is about, and there's lots of different ways of doing that. And what I will do is that when I send the email out, I'll send a link to one of my webinars about managing your mind, mood, etc. I think that will have some good hints and tips there to be able to do that. But I think the more we can quieten our mind is that and come into the now, the more then our wisdom can come up. And so my book, there's loads of things in my book, is that the book is about that mastering your inner critic. And when I wrote it, I realized that actually once my inner critic was quieter and I was looking after my inner fearful child, this wisdom came out. And who knows what that wisdom will tell you and how that will help you going forward. So obviously we could have a whole coaching session, but it's 1 o'clock now. But hopefully that will, that's giving you some little nuggets, and I will send some more in the email. Is that okay? Okay, thank you so much for coming along.
Thank you.
I look forward to seeing you on future webinars. And the next one is on the 11th of January, which is about changing habits of a lifetime. So you might want to come. And hopefully to welcome you on one of my courses. It'd be really great to have you along. So thank you and take care. Bye.